Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 11 of Give Freedom a Chance, the podcast from the Libertarian Party UK. I'm your host, Luca Bocci. Thank you for spending part of your Saturday with us, talking about freedom and how to defend ourselves against the many forces that would love to see us in chains and everything. Again, thank you for being here, and we are trying to make this appointment a weekly appointment and to make it as interesting as possible. But the situation isn't great because, as you might know, the Libertarian Party is having an election, the by-election in Gordon and Denton up in Manchester, and obviously all our resources are devoted to that. But we will make sure to have this conversation on and to talk about actually interesting stuff and serious stuff that can help you in your day-to-day life. The subject this week, the title is a bit generic because obviously there is so much happening going on, and right now we had no idea exactly what to talk about, but we came up with something. As in, our goal as libertarians is to promote freedom and liberty and to make sure that the conversation is substantial, is based on real things. But we've seen that media and the other political parties are doing everything they can to distract you and to make sure that you don't think about the real dangers. But the guys of the Libertarian Party, they were up, they were doing canvassing, they were going door to door. And actually, one of our guests was actually there and can give you some updates on how to make sure that the conversation is on serious topics and not the stuff that the media would like us to talk about. So again, we hope that this could be an interesting conversation, maybe help you in your day-to-day life when you have people that come to you and say, oh yeah, but if you libertarians come to power, my God, who will build the roads? Who will do the hospitals and stuff? Again, this is the kind of question that we like to help you answer. So again, I cannot be talking by myself. Let me turn on the microphones and have all my guests here, and here they are. So again, thank you to Brian Correia. And am I pronouncing it correctly?
Yes, that's very good.
Okay, that's great. Awesome. So he's a libertarian activist, but also a fellow podcaster. And so maybe he can help us to navigate the media environment in the US and exactly how the conversation is going into libertarian circles. Because as we've seen, if you follow the news, the real news, not the stuff that people want to distract you, there is a lot going on. Thank you for being here, Brian.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
And then again, we have Mr. Martin Day, which is a former leader of the Libertarian Party UK, and it's great to have you here. If I'm not mistaken, you were up in Manchester and having a conversation with the lovely people of the district. It's not district. What is the correct name? It's the constituency. Gordon and Denton, yeah.
The by-election on there, and yes, I've been up there having conversations with people on the doorstep and seeing what the general tone of the place is. It's a poor area, so it traditionally was a Labour area, a left-wing area, and there seems to be a lot of that, but we were able to turn the conversations on some occasions, so it's been a very uplifting experience in many ways.
Oh boy, that's great. I'm sure you had better luck than people were doing door-to-door for the Labour Party. Because I've heard, I don't have any direct experience of that, because back when I was doing canvassing in Texas, back in 2012, I was in the US and participated to the campaign of a certain Republican senator, which then became quite well known, Mr. Ted Cruz. And I was working for him, so we were going door to door, but we already knew exactly, okay, this house, this is a Republican registered, this is probably lefty, oh yeah, he won't be here. So it was very organized. I think we were working with tablets for the first time. Back in 2012, it was very organized. We had our own sheet and the questions to do. It was the first time I was doing door to door because in the UK it's more common, but in Italy, I come from Italy, so it's not really normal. You don't do that. You do a meeting in the local, area, in the pub or something. You have a public meeting and then you meet people. But I've heard that people that go there and say, oh yeah, I come representing the Labour Party and stuff, they're shouted down. people say, what the hell are you doing? Which is quite interesting, I might say. But I want to just start the conversation with one of the things that I've noticed nowadays, and this is that there is so much on the plate. And there is a difference between us and lefties. People from the left, usually, they walk to the same drum. They walk to the same drum beat. They are marching in line, lockstep. They change subject when, I don't know how they do it. I don't know, maybe it's telepathy or something. But when they say, oh, now it's affordability, and everyone is talking about affordability online, on the media and stuff, and then they change the tune and say, oh, now it's Trump, he's a dictator with the tariffs and stuff, now the Supreme Court, they walk in lockstep. As libertarians, and in general on the right, everyone is different. But I don't know, Brian, in the conversation we're having, I'm assuming you're in touch with what is going on with the libertarian community in the US. What are the big subjects that people are talking about? Are they being convinced by the narrative and it's all about the Epstein files? It's about, I don't know, or maybe they are focused on substantial issues. Can you just explain it to us?
Sure. I think that, the Libertarian Party here in the US, and I can't speak for, the US, but here in South Carolina, at least, where I'm located, the Libertarian Party has a tendency to allow itself to get distracted from time to time. So now we have the DHS and the immigration enforcement, and of course there's the Epstein files, and we try and stay on we try and center our conversations economically, because libertarians come from everywhere, right? So most of us came from either the political right in the United States or the political left. We're progressives and we're conservatives. We come into the Libertarian Party and we carry some of those biases with us. So my involvement in the Libertarian Party is always to try and center our conversation around the economic matters. So we get distracted into this DHS stuff and the Epstein files and things of that nature. And when I try and get the conversation, somebody's trying to pull me off and talk about, well, if we don't have the government to do this, we don't have the government to do that, how are we going to get these things done? My answer to that is typically remember all the bad things, whether you're on the political left or the political right. Right? The things you don't like about government, it's the same government. So if you're on the political left in the United States and you want the government to be responsible for providing you with healthcare and housing and food and all these different things that they want the government to come in and do for the general population, but they're also very angry that DHS is snatching people off the street and deporting them. I always try and remind them, look, it's the same government. The same government you're angry at for doing these things is the same government you want to become completely financially dependent upon. And if you're on the political right and you're angry at the government for, I think the right is more focused right now on the Epstein files. And I think this is one thing that the country's relatively unified on. But if you're on the political right and you are angry about COVID and the lockdowns and things of that nature, and now I stand with ICE and I support ICE and so on and so forth. So, well, that's the same government. Those same police powers are the ones that closed down your businesses and told you to stay in your house and wouldn't let you go to your church services. It's the same government. So I'm trying to remind people that when you're angry at the government, you're seeing the government do things that you don't like and it makes you angry and you're out there protesting, but then you're asking the government to do more things. It's the same government. It's the same politicians. It's the same corruption. It's the same entities that are going to be responsible for doing those things you want them to do, and they're going to use that power in ways that you don't want them to.
Yeah, I know. This is actually the real conundrum is that everybody thinks that the state is doing too much when it does things that they don't agree with, but obviously they would love to use the power of the state in order to do the things that we all think would be good. And actually, we libertarians have got a different message. We go there and say, well, actually, I would like the government to have less power, the government to let me do my own thing. And I'm not sure, because when I moved back in the UK back in 2011, I lived there for around 10 years before moving to Germany and then back home to Italy, where I am right now. And I always assumed that the general character of the British people was libertarian. Because I was always thinking in terms of, the whole stereotype, the stiff upper lip, being serious, being proper, and saying, my house is my castle, do whatever I want, just government, just let me do my own thing. And then I moved there and I realized that actually things were not nearly like that. So, Martin, now that you had the chance to just touch the situation, I know Gordon and Denton is really weird because we talked with Dan Clark, which is the candidate for the Libertarian Party UK last week in our episode. If you have missed that, you can go on YouTube and check it out. It was a very interesting conversation. And he was telling us that actually the constituency is kind of split in two. You have an area where it's more like working class, and another area where you have lots of immigrants and there are other dynamics in place. But in general, what are what did you hear from people? What are the things that people are actually interested about? Because obviously the platform for the Libertarian Party is pretty clear. We worked a lot on that. So we have our own proposals for how to change the country and to make sure that it doesn't fall off the cliff, which is perilously close to nowadays. And so what have you found out that these are the topics that people are more interested in?
Well, we talked about low taxation since the Labour government has come in some 18, 20 months ago. Taxes have gone through the roof and everybody is feeling the pinch. If it moves, tax it seems to be the current mantra. But again, we ran up against people who loved it. Free school meals, they say. Oh, yeah, except there's nothing that is free. We discussed digital ID. Digital ID was a big positive. There were a lot of people very much against that and very much aligned with our stance on it. And in the same way, digital cash or digital money and the war on cash has been, excuse me, has been a big subject. People don't want it. Labour Party are not popular, but the left has fragmented somewhat, and it looks like the Greens are doing very well. We spoke to houses. I've always voted Labour. I've voted Labour all my life, but not this time. I'm going to vote Green. Anything to stop Reform, who are the more slightly right party, slightly to the right of the Conservatives, one thinks. So, yeah, there are things that resonate on the doorstep, but it is very difficult to get people to understand the entire package.
Yeah, I guess that's the main problem, because if you are detached from things that are happening in real life, because if you talk to regular people, I don't know, if I read a lot of American media and stuff, because I've been a journalist since 1990 and I've been mostly talking about American politics and stuff. And if you talk to regular people, the thing that worries them the most is, first of all, the price of gas at the pump, and that's issue number one. And second, how empty is my buggy or shopping cart or whatever you want to call it when I go to the supermarket and I live around, around $200. I go to Costco, whatever, Walmart, whatever you have, Kroger's and stuff. I come back, I say, I spent $200 and I have, a half empty buggy. And people are obviously quite worried about that. And these are the real issues. But in order to make them do the jump and say, well, things are so expensive because the government is doing too much. It has borrowed too much money. It has printed too much cash. And nowadays, what you have in your wallet, the $100 bill that used to buy you a lot of stuff, now it doesn't buy you nearly as much. So that is the issue. But it's difficult to go there and say, well, why are you talking about removing cash? And say, yeah. Think about if you have something, you don't have a wallet anymore, and the money that you have has an expiration date because the government decided that in order to do good for the economy, if you don't spend it in 2 months, it will be gone. That's a nightmare. And people say, no, it's nothing. You're the usual doom and gloom. It's a real possibility. It's very real. I don't know, Brian. It seems to me that The difficult part is to make them look a little bit ahead, because the immediate worry is, I don't have enough money by the third week. By the end of the month, I don't have money. But in reality, people need to do the jump, the logical jump, and say, you are in this situation because of stuff that the government is doing and that we shouldn't do. So I don't know. How can you do that? Because it's tricky.
I think that there's plenty of real world examples, and even very recently, that I think people can look at and go, yeah, I understand where you're coming from when you talk about digitization and the government controlling the currency and so on. So I bring up the convoy, the protests in Canada during in 2020 during the pandemic, and these truckers were protesting, and the Canadian government went in and essentially froze all these guys' accounts, so they couldn't access their money essentially as a punishment for their protesting. So when we talk about SNAP benefits in the United States, that's our supplemental nutritional benefit in the United States. At the federal level, you get SNAP benefits, you get Medicaid benefits, whatever the case may be. I look at these things and I say, look, you're becoming dependent on the state to a point where you're not able to provide for yourself. And as it's like pushing a string, as the government pumps more money in the form of redistribution, taxes from this side, or printing money and handing it to you, you're pushing a string. Things get more expensive. So then you need more government subsidies, and you become more and more dependent upon them as they make things intentionally more expensive through their money printing, because politicians don't want to get in front of you and tell you the truth that the government can't afford to be a nanny to the entire nation and provide for everybody. So that's the first thing. It's like you're falling under their control. And this goes back to my initial point of, remember, everything you think about the government that's evil, this is the government you're slowly becoming very dependent upon. So you take a real world example of government implementing its control over your assets in that way. And then there's a bill that Thomas Massie is a relatively libertarian leaning Republican in the U.S. House. And he's got a bill. I can't remember the name of it now off the top of my head. But anyway, it has to do with it's an agricultural bill. And you take these examples of how the government intervenes in like just a regular transaction. So if you're a farmer and you grow beef and you can't sell your beef, essentially, like I can't butcher my beef and sell a steak essentially in my community, because it has to go through the USDA. And so there's only like so many USDA facilities, and there's huge backlog, and it's incredibly expensive and complex process. And Thomas Massie presented a bill saying that, look, let's say if I grow beef in Kentucky and I butcher it in Kentucky, and then I could sell it and it never crosses state lines, then I could sell it in Kentucky without the federal government being involved. And I tell people, you can't grow beef. But beef is one of the things that's really kind of run up in price lately here in the U.S. You can't raise and sell beef to consumers locally without federal involvement. And it's just one way that the federal government gets in the way of people who want to produce things and people who want to consume things. And then I try and break this down to people and just explain that whenever there's a high level of demand for something, and you can't access it affordably, and nobody seems to be entering the marketplace to provide it, 99% of the time, in between the person who needs the thing and the person who makes the thing, stands government from preventing them from providing that to you. And that's because government wants to be involved in all these things. They want to have you be dependent upon them, because that's how they get votes. That's how they get elected.
Absolutely. But that's not only the thing. It's that if you think about the fact that there are only 3 major companies that do all the beef and chicken processing in the US, such a concentration of stuff is absolutely impossible. Market dynamics by themselves, they do not do this. It's just because you make life so complicated, you put so much regulation in, that all the small people are priced out, and they cannot complain because they cannot comply, because it would take, having a legal department with 50 lawyers in order to follow every single stupid regulation of all the thousands agencies that the government puts. The end result is that if you go to a supermarket and you go for a pound of ground beef, and you spend £7, because that's the price you have in the UK, which is probably around $10, maybe $10, $11 I've seen that somewhere. $10, $11 for 10, 15% fat. So it's not particularly super lean. And okay, grass-fed is more of a thing because in the UK, in general, beef is grass-fed and it doesn't have antibiotics and stuff. But in reality, it's not the top level. If you want top level, you go to a local butcher and you get that, you can spend 12, maybe 15 pounds. So $20, $25, which is crazy.
Well, and that's an interesting thing. It's a very interesting point that you're making about the top shelf stuff. So if I want to go and buy local grass-fed, high-quality, top-tier beef, right? If I'm a person who has money, if I'm a person who has disposable income, so I'm not a paycheck-to-paycheck person, I can go to that same local cattle, the farmer, rancher, whatever, and I could buy a half a beef. I could buy 400 pounds of beef. I could buy it in bulk because I could take ownership of the animal. But that same farmer, that same rancher, he can't sell me individual steaks without going through the USDA. So if I'm buying in bulk, if I'm buying the animal, if I have the money to do that, then I can bypass all that. And my price per pound on beef becomes cheaper if I have enough disposable income to buy, $3,000 worth of beef all at once, right? One of the things that I point out to those who have, I think that a lot of people who are charitable, who think the government should be doing more things. I think that they genuinely want to do good. They want to see good things happen. They want to help their fellow man. But I always point out that when they create these scenarios, you're creating shortages, you're creating displacements in the market that make it harder for these people to obtain things on their own, the people you want to help. But if for the people who have some extra money, for the people who have disposable income, there's a way for them to buy their way out of that system. You see it with healthcare in terms of people who can afford to go out and get additional private insurance. You see it in the food marketplace, as I just described. And so that's another aspect I like to point out to people is like, if it was about safety, there wouldn't be a way to buy your way out of it. But there's usually a way to buy your way out of it. So it's not about safety; it's about control.
Yeah, it's about control. And actually, that's the thing that actually surprised me when I went to the Metroplex area because there's some friends of mine they lived actually in East Dallas, and I was surprised when they had a couple of large freezers and stuff, and it was all beef. And I was looking at that and saying, "Oh my God, you must be, I don't know, super rich." And he said, "No. I went to the ranch down there. I got half a beef with a friend of mine, and we had it butchered. And then I got, I don't know, 50 pounds of steak and 20 pounds of bacon. And I don't know. It's just a thing. But then again, if you don't have the meat processing facilities that are authorized by the government, you're pricing out. I remember, but I live in Tuscany, and my parents, my grandparents had a farm, and so it was normal for us to raise animals. And then when it came to time, you would have a friend of yours who would come to the house and then butcher. You would butcher a pig, or you would butcher, I don't know, some cattle and stuff. But in general, it was beef, and he would produce everything by itself. He would stay there an entire day, and you would have sausage, you would have prosciutto, ham, and other stuff. And now it's almost impossible because there are so many regulations imposed by the European Union. You cannot do that. And I was sure that if I was getting the steak, I knew exactly what that cow had been eating. I knew that it's grass-fed. I didn't put anything inside her. I didn't put any antibiotics and stuff. And that is quite crazy. So I was just reading one of our friends, viewers from the chat, who was asking this question. I think, Martin, maybe you can do that. He was asking, I'm assuming he's from the US because he was doing that. He said, how is it possible that Reform and the Greens and other parties are gaining ground while libertarian ideals are out of the conversation, not just in the UK, but also in Germany, in Italy and stuff? And I was trying to answer him and saying, mostly it's because people don't have any idea what libertarian ideals are because they are not taught in school, and also because we are completely excluded from the media. So most people don't even know that this is an option. So you're just thinking, oh yeah, these are the 3-4 political parties and these are the options. I have to choose between one of them. And then we go there, we raise our hand and say, well, actually, no, you have another alternative. It's the libertarian way. And the first thing you have to do is to explain what exactly do we want to do? Because they have no idea. Maybe it's that, I don't know.
Well, the first reason, the parties you named who are gaining ground have got major donors, and, well, we don't. So money is, it is an issue. As for gaining ground, we're looking good in Gorton and Denton. We've actually had some good publicity, including from the BBC. Prior to that, we were under a complete media blackout. The BBC used to invite our chairman on some 10 or 15 years ago as a regular guest. And then all of a sudden it completely died. The invitations dried up and we were not part of the mainstream at all. I can't tell you about the German party. I'm not familiar with that. But you only have to look at Argentina, where Mr. Milei is showing it can be done and will be done. We've got a number of candidates lined up, not just for the local elections, but for national elections, general election when it comes. And it's a sufficient number that the major broadcasters have to give us some coverage. And that is a crucial line to cross in our attempts to boost.
Yeah, I know the whole point. I can give you a little bit of explanation about the German thing, the German Libertarian Party, which is not exactly libertarian, but it's more in line with our libertarian way of thinking. In reality, it's just that in a situation of crisis where people are actually hurting, because it's not really in a generally positive economic environment, all issues are treated more like luxury belief and stuff, and saying, yeah, it would be good to have libertarianism, but yeah, it's not really necessary. When the situation it's really rock bottom, as it did in Argentina, where you had 40% of the population which was in extreme poverty, and people were just skimming money off the top, and trade unions and leftist elected officials were accumulating billions upon billions just in kickbacks and stuff. Situation was so desperate that a crazy man like Javier Milei said, well, should we maybe stop this stealing and stuff? And people said, what have I got to lose? I can go ahead and give him a chance. And the economy is doing great. People are, I read a report last week or something, and said there was, because school in the Southern Hemisphere, school is starting now, because for them is the end of summer. So it's school year is starting. And there was one guy, and I said, I worked all my life. It's been 10 years I've been buying supplies for my kids. And it's the first time that actually stuff costs less, because they have removed tariffs. And so people are able to buy stuff less. And so there is less taxation, less stuff. And so they said, my rent has gone down. I go to the supermarket and things cost less. I bought a new iPhone and I paid it half of what I did because they removed tariffs. And then I go to buy supplies for my kid and they cost less. So people are saying, oh yeah, all this libertarian stuff, it kind of works. But the problem is that you go to the media and all they're hearing is that, oh, there was a general strike against Milei. And they're telling you that. They're not telling you that 88% of the businesses were open because people don't have any trust left in the trade unions. So it's just so biased. And then the other thing is that libertarian solutions are seen as less strong or less effective than what they're saying, because it's easy for reform or restore, whatever, to say, oh, it's all their fault. I don't know, we should kick them out because labor is rubbish. Yeah, the labor government is pretty bad, but it's the system that is the problem. No one talks about that because they want to be in charge of the system. The Quangos, that for Brian, Quango is quasi non-governmental organizations. It's pretty much like non-elected bureaucrats that decide pretty much everything, because the British government in the last 30 years since Blair came to power, may God curse his name, because it's been the beginning of the end for the UK. it's been saying, no, power should not be in the government, in the parliament. The power should be sent to experts that know best, and then they should be able to decide everything. So when Liz Truss, the former Conservative Prime Minister, came into 10 Downing Street, she said, I was assuming that being the Prime Minister, I was in charge. And then I realized that actually I'm not in charge, because I cannot decide monetary policy, because that's the Bank of England and the Office of Budget Responsibility. I cannot decide import. I cannot decide this. I cannot send illegals away, because this is ACHR, so the European Court of Human Rights, that decides that. And she said, I cannot do anything, because all the power has been stripped away from the government and the parliament, has been given to quangos. So when we go there and say we would like to destroy it, people who are making, I don't know, £300,000 a year working for a quango, they're obviously up in arms. And the lawyers are up in arms, because solicitors make a lot of money, and the consultants, which make billions of pounds on this thing. I don't know, it's just that it doesn't seem like a very effective message. Milei won because he came with the chainsaw and said, I want to cut down everything. Ron Paul used to say, and the Fed, and he was just showing a mock-up of the Argentinian central bank with the chainsaw and saying, I'm cutting everything. He still hasn't managed to do that, but he's working on it. So I don't know.
We actually have always had a logo with a griffon, and we've just managed to get past a new logo with the griffon holding the chainsaw. The Electoral Commission, another unelected, appointed bunch of civil servants, waited till the day after registration for the by-election before they approved our logo. So we couldn't use it this time, but we will be using it very much in the future.
Yeah, I know. I think this is also the point. They don't like that, because they say, oh, it's a weapon. Really? Whoever, aside from video games, who is using a chainsaw as a weapon? Are you crazy? It's nonsense. Come on, a chainsaw is to cut down trees. I don't know. It's just, I don't know, Brian. I think maybe this is the problem. My brother Marco is watching, obviously, the show, and he is a coordinator for London and the Southeast for the Libertarian Party, saying the big struggle is against statist parties and anti-state parties. And the problem is that in Europe, and also in a great part of America, people are so much in love with the idea of the omnipotent government that is taking care of you, that they don't even think that a future without government is possible, or with a government that is way more limited than it was. And they keep forgetting that up until 1913, there was no income tax. And it was just a thing that was pop up. And people still had roads, railroad, hospitals and stuff. There was no Medicare, no Medicaid and stuff. You had local charities that were doing that. So I don't know, maybe it's just because they don't know history, or I'm just baffled sometimes, because it's...
Well, you know, they don't, propaganda and advertising and political ads, they don't spend billions of dollars a year on that stuff because it doesn't work. It works really, really well. And if you're wealthy and powerful, and you've gotten wealthy and powerful because of the status quo, the last thing you want to see is the status quo being disrupted. And individual liberty, personal freedom, economic freedom, that is a disruption to the status quo that has been in place in this country for over 100 years. And so there's a huge fight against that. When Javier Milei was running in the the media in the United States he got a lot of attention here, and he was painted as a far right, kind of a lunatic guy, and he got a lot of it. This Argentinian election got a lot of attention in the United States until it started to work. And once the poverty rate started falling, once housing prices started to fall and rental properties became available through the end of, once the dismantling of the state in Argentina started creating positive returns, there was a complete media blackout. The last significant news out of Argentina that made the rounds in the United States is the currency swap that we did with Argentina. This was a several months ago. So like a $40 billion currency swap, and everybody painted this as a bailout because Malay's policies were failing or whatever. It's like, it wasn't a bailout. It was a currency swap. This is something that governments do all the time. But nobody talks about the falling prices, the falling poverty level. That stuff never makes mainstream news here. We have this controversy right now with the SAVE Act. This is an act in the United States that's going to restrict. People are talking about restricting voters because it requires this idea or that idea. And most libertarians, myself included, oppose the SAVE Act. But I always say that the issue isn't the SAVE Act. It's not whether or not voters can get in there and vote. The thing that if we're talking about disenfranchising voters, we should be a lot more focused on the fact that the two parties in the United States, the Republicans and the Democrats, do everything they can to walk hand in hand and make sure that there is no competition to nobody's going to share the stage with their presidential candidates. We're not going to have access to any equal funding at the federal level to run our campaigns. We're not going to be allowed to compete. Limiting the choices that voters have is every bit as egregious, if not more so, than making it more difficult to vote. But we don't look at those things. And so you could see the status quo, and you see the political parties, and you can see the power structure doing all these different things to protect itself from competition. And it's just hard to break through that wall. And then when we get into these very controversial topics, I think this is why the culture war is so important to the left and the right, because these are emotional topics that evoke powerful reactions, and it makes it far easier to keep people from having broader conversations about bigger issues, like the fact that we're running $2 trillion deficits every year, and our currency's on the U.S. is getting ready to lose its world reserve currency status, and all these other things that are incredibly important, but much more complex and not as exciting to talk about. So you can see that they use these things and they ignore third parties. They ignore the successes of deregulation, and they do everything they can to protect themselves from competition. And that's where you were at the beginning of the show. You talked about all these different distractions and all these different things. And it's always something. I think 2 days ago, Donald Trump said he's going to have the Secretary of War release files relating to aliens. And there's always something going on to keep the public distracted and make sure
I know, but that's
conversations.
The curious thing, obviously, having been in the media for many years, many more than I probably should have, it's actually very curious, the fact that when there was a currency swap, it was all in the news and stuff, as you said. Oh, it's bailout. Trump is buying stuff because Milei is about to fall and implode and destroy. No one talked about the fact that the debt was fully repaid in less than a couple of months. Not only that, but the US government made a bunch of money. Correct. Because the Argentine peso strengthened. And so when they returned the swap, they made a lot of money. So they just sent 40 billion in to stabilize the country, the exchange rate of the peso. But then the peso gained so much in value because obviously the regulation is working. I just read yesterday that there was a mining operation in a province of Argentina where they said, hey, by the way, we thought we could find, let's say, 100,000 tons of uranium ore, but actually, no, it's 1 million. And then the Vaca Muerta shale oil and natural gas deposit actually is a lot bigger than they said. And they are selling it now to Uruguay and probably Chile and Brazil as well. So deregulation works. But why does it work? It works because Milei said, if you're coming to Argentina and investing billions and billions of dollars to build this structure, I will make sure that a subsequent government cannot cancel the deal. And so for 30 years, this is the laws that you will have. This is how much tax you will pay. And this is stability. And obviously businesses love stability because they say, oh, okay, if I know that I will pay 5% tax for 30 years, I can put 10 billion and I know that I'm going to recoup my cost and make profit because stability is what governments like, the businesses like. But no one is talking about that. And everyone is talking about that. You said the UFO stuff and everything. So this is actually crazy because the SAVE Act is actually, it could be a double-edged sword because they're going there and saying nowadays in the US, how the elections are run, the Constitution leaves that to the states. It's not a federal matter and was never a federal matter, and it was never intended to be a federal matter. And the proponents of the SAVE Act say that, yeah, I know, but this is just, it's not, you can still run your elections however you like, but you should have a voter ID. You should have ID. And people say, well, if I'm going to rent a car, they want my driving license and they want my ID. I open a bank account, they want my ID. An ID is necessary for everything. The only thing that is not necessary for is voting. But then again, you don't want to make it a federal matter because this opens the door to worse things in the future. So it's a complicated situation. While no one talks about the fact that every single state in the union is making small parties, third parties, and fourth parties jump through hoops, all sorts of hoops, in order to get to the ballot, because otherwise you are not a choice. And this is actually much more egregious. I completely agree. But I don't know, Martin, the thing that it just worries me a lot is that no one is really talking about the serious stuff. Because the fact that there are so many governments around the world that are saying we should restrict social media, but in reality, they're not talking about all social media. They are only talking about X. Because Facebook and Instagram and whatever and Google, they're complying all the time. So if you say something that they don't like, the government doesn't like, they pick up the phone or whatever and say, oh yeah, this user should be out. X instead is the only place where you can still have a conversation if it's legal. Obviously, if you're inciting people to go there and shoot someone, of course you're going to be arrested. I just think that this is a complete distraction, and our job as libertarians should be to just raise our hand and say, guys, this is the real danger. But I don't know, does it work? Because it seems to me the only way to have proper conversation, because if we're following the narrative, we will always lose, because they have all the media, they have all the newspapers, they have all the power, the state is, and we are always losing.
I think there's several issues that come to the front here. I totally agree with your summarization that it's X that they really want shut down. But they're talking about kids and under 16s, and none of their arguments make any sense. Firstly, to shut down social media for under 16s, and then in the UK, they're proposing to give 16-year-olds the vote. So we get to a situation where a young 16-year-old lad or girl is one day before their birthday. They haven't been able to look on social media. All they've been fed is mainstream media. And then the day after, they're entitled to vote. And that's a scary situation, because they really haven't seen the full gamut of opportunities of political alternatives. And it really is gearing towards the two old parties again. The other situation with under 16s is that there's then going to be proof needed that one is over 16. I mean, if you look at my face, I am slightly over 16, but I don't want digital ID to have to prove that I'm over 16. And I rather suspect that this has something to do with digital ID, bringing it in by the back door, because it was very much rejected when it was floated as an idea on its own. The uproar on all social media, even Facebook, was extreme, and Keir Starmer rode back on it. But bringing in this, it's like a back way of getting hated legislation in.
Yeah, no, this is the usual Fabian way, because I don't know if Brian is familiar with that, but the whole Fabian society is the is the foundation of all evil, as I might say. Second only to the French Revolution, because the French Revolution was really the beginning of the end for Europe. And then the Fabian Society, which obviously in his logo, in his emblem, it's got a wolf in sheep's clothing, which is very, very indicative. And they always do that. They will push ahead no matter what. They will go there and say, I want digital ID imposed because I want everyone to be responsible for what they say online, and I want to have the ability to stop them from traveling, to stop them from buying stuff, to stop them, because now they're talking about if you have exceeded your CO2 quota, you will not be able to travel abroad. And I was just wondering to myself, travel abroad, why not travel inside the country? No. They want you not to be able to leave the country, because we've seen, I think Steven Spielberg, yesterday or a couple of days ago announced that he was leaving California because the stupid Gavin Newsom, or Gavin Newscom, as the president likes to call him, decided to put a billionaire tax. So if you're earning more than a certain amount of money, you will pay 3% or something every year. And obviously, so the lovey-dovey lefties, they said, no, I can't have that. So the companies are leaving. I think Valero, which is a big petrochemical company born and based in California, decided to move their headquarters to Texas or Florida, I don't know. And so they're leaving. But in the US, you can't do that because every state has got different regulations. You've got some states that have no tax, no income tax. Some states they have 10% sales tax. Some they have 5%, and so on. So you have internal competition. In Europe, you're not allowed to do that because every country has got the same. The UK, you pay as much tax in Newcastle as you do in London, even if London, the wages are much higher and stuff, but the tax is the same. So the only way you have to escape is to flee the country. But we've seen in the Netherlands and Germany, if you leave the country, they want you to pay tax. So you've got the exit tax, which is crazy, but it's been passed. So if I am in Germany and I have a limited liability company and I want to leave, I want to move to Spain because the weather is better and maybe I've got a fiscal regime that is more convenient for me, they make you pay. And sometimes it's tens of thousands of euros. So this is what they want. But if they can't do it straight on, they will find another way. It's always like that. So that's the crazy, crazy part. But I don't know, Brian, I've seen that now we just wanted to have a conversation less than an hour because I don't know, we're all busy and you have your whole day ahead of you. So I had this impression that in America right now, the whole conversation about the economy and stuff and tariffs and so on and so forth is crazy because you have sometimes people look into substantive issues and other times they're just lying, completely lying. And I've noticed one thing, people that are on X constantly, maybe not as constantly as I am, but they follow the news on X, are living in a completely different world than people that just watch social media. I don't know, the decision yesterday of the Supreme Court has been paraded around and saying this is a massive victory for democracy and stuff, and Trump has now come up with a bloody nose. And a couple of hours later, they just said, well, the Supreme Court decided that I cannot use a specific law to impose these tariffs. Not a problem. I will use this other law, 1974 law, and I will impose the same tariffs. And by the way, 10% more. And you hear the first news, the second news is only on X. I don't know. How can you have a country when there are people living in completely different realities? It just, democracy cannot function like this. Am I missing something?
The from a psychological perspective, I'm no expert on this, but you bring your biases into everything, and then you want to believe the things that it's confirmation bias, right? I want to believe the things that make me right in what I already believe. I'm seeking ways to strengthen my beliefs, not challenge them for the most part. This is one of the weird things about libertarianism, or one of the reasons I think we have trouble communicating with a lot of people, is most libertarians, at least in the United States, that I've ran into, We came here from another place. We came here from the right or from the left, and we had to challenge the majority of our preconceived notions to come to libertarianism and leave the Republicans or the Democrats behind to come into this new party. Well, that's a very difficult thing for people to do, to challenge their preconceived notions. So we're on the red team, which would be the Republican team, or the Democrats, the blue team. The blues are good, the reds are bad, and go, right? And so then everything I view, everything I see, all of my opinions are formed around this base reality that one side's good and one side's bad. So the tariff conversation was one of the most fascinating things for me, because I have this conversation with Democrats and Republicans, people on the right and the left of the United States. And I have my Democrat friends saying tariffs are just a tax paid by the consumer. They're just going to drive prices up. Tariffs make things more expensive. And I go, you're right. You're 100% correct. Tariffs are a bad idea. They're going to make everything more expensive. So are corporate taxes. Corporations don't pay taxes, just like they're not going to pay the tariffs, they're not going to pay corporate taxes. Those are all pass-through expenses paid by the consumer. They're paid by the consumer either through higher prices, lower wages, or less employment opportunity. My Democrat friends will absolutely understand that tariffs will push prices up, but cannot relate that back to corporate taxes. My Republican friends absolutely understand that corporate taxes make things more expensive, that's a pass-through expense to the consumer. But because they're on Trump's team, because they're Team Red, they do not see that tariffs are going to make things more expensive. So we talk about the inability to break through and have these conversations, or people feeding their media bias. Your media feed, the algorithm, and I try and explain this to people all the time. As a libertarian, I see everything because I click on a lot of different stories. I'll like or dislike stuff that it's not all in line, because we have a different way of looking at the world. But if you are on the right or the left, and you interact with media a certain way, the algorithm knows, and it's just feeding you things that you interact with. So if you lean to the political left, it's feeding you very positive left stuff, and it's making you hate the enemy, because anger makes you click, right? So you're being fed a steady diet of confirmation bias. And that's how we get to this place where we just can't have reasonable, rational conversations. Like if you can understand that tariffs make things more expensive and not corporate taxes, and vice versa, I say that's a great litmus test for you have lost objectivity in these conversations.
Yeah, I know this is actually very interesting, because nowadays I'm thinking that the reality is just that the bias used to be, I don't know, when I started being a journalist back in the last century, they taught me, aside from the 5 W's, who, what, where, stuff, they taught me the things that say, if it's not confirmed by at least 3 independent sources, you don't publish it. But then again, I worked for years in a news media agency in London, and then I moved to OTT service for sports in Italy, based in Germany, and then I returned, and now I work as a freelancer for several newspapers in Italy. And now they're just telling me, publish now. And I just go there and say, well, guys, we don't have confirmation. I cannot put my signature on stuff that is not confirmed. Or maybe they go there and say, yeah, but I've read it on the wire. Yes, the Associated Press back in 1998 used to be a paragon of balance and stuff, and it was very serious and stuff. Nowadays, they just run anything. They don't have confirmation and stuff. So they see a nice headline and they just publish it. And maybe they retract it, but down the line, no one reads that. Who cares? I made a big headlines, I got a lot of clicks, and that's fine. But then people do not want to pay for information. Now they are paying for information, but they're paying for independent journalists. But they're not protected. So it's easy to just, I don't know, Nick Shirley in Minnesota, he discovered the whole Somali frauds, and he's done an amazing job. If he was living in Italy, it would have been shut down in 5 minutes. because all the people would have gone to a lawyer and said, oh, you are defaming us, you are spreading false information. No one would believe him, and he would be forced to go to court for years and spend hundreds of thousands of euros in order to prove that he didn't lie. So it's odd, because nowadays, if the media is so biased, you cannot have a proper conversation, because half of the population thinks that Javier Milei is a madman, is a fascist, and is crazy, and the other half of the conversation of the population thinks that he can do nothing wrong. He's great. He's provided wealth for Argentina and stuff. So how can these two worlds talk to each other if they cannot concur on the facts? And they are facts. I think yesterday they passed in Argentina the labor law reform, and I've read Italian, French, UK newspapers that were saying, oh, Milei is crazy because he's making people work 12 hours a day, and it's crazy, and they're slave wages. And I just looked at the law, and the law says that you have to work 48 hours in a week for your contract. You are free to decide how you want to work. You can work 12 hours a day, 4 days, and have 3 days off, or you can work less and work 5 days a week. In the agency I worked for, we shifted to a 4-3 pattern because people liked it. So they were working 12 hours a day in the newsroom for 4 days, and then they were having 3 days off. It's free. It's allowed because you have your hourly wage. Yeah, it's 48 hours, 40 hours, however it is. But they were saying, oh, he's a madman. People are enslaved and stuff. How can you have a conversation if you don't even know the basics? And this is facts. You cannot dispute facts. I don't know, Martin. It's just sometimes it's so frustrating.
It's getting even worse now because we have the left-wing media who will say, oh, he's heinous, making us all work so much. We've got the right-wing media who often don't report on Milei. A lot of people don't even know he exists. And now, of course, we are getting AI-created news, which may or may not be vaguely true. And we're hitting a point where everything since 2022 is not completely believable. Going back to your point about having confirmation that the story is true. You might have confirmation, but it might be 3 fake AI accounts, which opens a whole new world of conversation there. But yeah, the mainstream media is doing an appalling job. It really is. Well, it's doing a job for the government, which is what it is, government mouthpiece. It wants us all to be, whether people are inclined towards the right, who in the UK are the blue, or the left, who are the red. Yeah, it doesn't matter who they're inclined to. Both sides have been increasing government involvement in day-to-day lives over the last almost 30 years.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy. It's crazy. It's crazy to me, Brian, when you figure out exactly why the Republicans are red and why the Democrats are blue. And it all came down to the first color TV transmission. And then there was this guy who decided, oh, no, the Republicans are red. Yeah, sure, of course. Republicans are red. And Democrats are blue. And they said, but it makes no sense. They're the left. And they said, no, it's fine. It's fine. And now if you go there and I say, vote blue no matter who, if you are in the UK, you're voting Conservative. If you are in Italy, it means voting for a right-wing party. If you are in France, in Spain, and everything. If you go to America and I say, I'm a true blue, so, oh, you're a Democrat. I say, no. Why is that? But then again, it's crazy. We've already run over a little bit, so I just wanted to just finish off with a very quick question and stuff. So, Brian, do you think that the situation is about to get worse before it gets better? Because nowadays I'm thinking that the trajectory is really bad, because we've seen that the same thing with the AI and stuff is it's very dangerous. I don't know if you've read about the OpenAI thing, the shooting that happened in British Columbia in Canada. So apparently the very disturbed guy that was actually then came out and killed his family and then killed a bunch of kids in the school had been generating stuff on ChatGPT, and they were very disturbing. So this was flagged by the internal security, and they had a team of developers that were saying, look, this guy is really, really not well. He is deranged. He's about to do something. Should we flag it to the police so that maybe they can go there and have a look and see if this guy is dangerous or not? And then the supervisors decided, no, absolutely. We say nothing. Absolutely. It's not. Why? Because they didn't want people to know that every time they input stuff into AI, they are being monitored. So for them, protecting their bottom line was more important than actually saving lives. And this is just the beginning. We've seen what happened. The Amazon Web Services, they got shut down by the internal AI software that decided that the best way to streamline operation was to shut down the service. And that's why YouTube yesterday wasn't working and all the platforms were down. This is just AI running amok, and no one is talking about this stuff. But I don't know. It seems to me that the trajectory we're on is pretty bad, and that maybe there should be a way to just, I don't know, maybe say stop the world. I want to.
Well, I don't know. You know, people in the United States will say this is the most divided we've ever been as a nation. We fought an actual civil war, so we've fought 2 world wars. We have a lot of headwinds. There's a lot of bad stuff that we have to face. A lot of problems that we have to sort out, but I try and be relatively positive overall. I mean, at the end of the day, this is still just an amazing time to be alive. From the perspective of global history, we're in the top 1/1000th in terms of the way that we live, particularly if you're in a developed Western nation. We have our issues. We certainly have a lot of corruption and corrupt powers that need to be rooted out. I think that human action, typically what happens is it takes an actual crisis to force people into action, to break people out of their normalcy bias, to break people out of their confirmation biases. It takes a crisis, and I think things are going to get worse. But I still am overall. I'm still optimistic about our ability to have the right people in the right places to make the right decisions in the long run. But in the short term, we're definitely facing some serious challenges with the way that we're mismanaging our currency, the growth of the police and surveillance state, and these new technologies and how they're being implemented. So yeah, we definitely need to come together on that kind of stuff. But overall, I try and remain somewhat optimistic.
That's a great message, Martin. Again, you've had the pulse of the situation and stuff. So we're getting really close to the election in Gordon and Denton, and there is a lot of activity going on. We will talk later maybe about what is happening with Restore Britain, which is now just blowing up, and Reform UK, they're just losing their mind collectively. They're calling each other names and stuff. I see an opportunity there. Maybe, I don't know, they're getting weirder and weirder on the right. So maybe there is aiming for libertarian way of thinking. So I don't know. Can you just end up with a positive note and stuff? Because that would be really welcome.
To find a positive, yes. The right is fracturing from the one original blue party, the Conservatives. We've now got Reform and even Restore coming along behind it. From one on the left, we've got exactly the same happening. We've got the Labour Party, the Reds. The Liberal Democrats aren't very liberal and they're not very democratic, but they lean towards the left. And the Greens on a resurgence now, and they look like they're ahead of Labour in Gorton and Denton. So with all this fracturing, people are looking for different ideas. And while we've been out in Gorton and Denton, people have seen that there is an alternative, and we can only hope that they listen.
Okay, that's lovely. Thank you very much. So, Brian, just to think, how can people find you? What do you do? What are your addresses and stuff? Just people can, I think you have a YouTube channel. Am I right?
Yeah, I'm Brian for Liberty. Brian, the number 4 Liberty. TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, across the social media spectrum, I guess. I'm the chairman of the South Carolina or the Anderson County Libertarian Party here in South Carolina. I run the social media for South Carolina's Libertarian Party. I'm a 2-time candidate for the Libertarian Party in Wisconsin, and I'm going to be running for U.S. House here in the upcoming 2026 election. So you can also find my brianliberty.com is my website for the campaign. So thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. Hope you guys track me down.
Absolutely. If people coming from America are seeing that and they want to donate to your campaign, I don't know if you already have a page for your campaign and stuff. Stay tuned, follow him on social media, because, we need all the good candidates we can. You look like a very prepared gentleman. So it would be very good for the people of South Carolina and for the people of the United States as a whole to have you in Congress. It would be great. Martin, again, the date is coming very close. How can people get in touch? How can people help? Because Gorton and Denton is important, but it's not the end all, be all, and everything, because the Libertarian Party is still working towards other things, because the elections are coming. We don't know if it's going to be 2029. Hopefully it's going to be a lot sooner. So how can people get in touch and do something?
They can get in touch via our website, which is libertarianpartyuk.com, and if you /join, then you can come and join us. Benefits include discussing our policies. And you can also join us via our Libertarian Party UK YouTube channel.
Okay, that's lovely. Thanks a lot, Martin. Thanks a lot, Brian. Obviously, the biggest thanks go to everyone that has been with us. And I'm really sorry, just this is a small podcast. We're kind of growing. So if you can help us with a thumbs up, joining the channel and sharing the link with anyone who might be interested in our style of discussion and conversation about topical news, and not only that would be really massively appreciated. I'm your host, Luca Bocci, and I will see you again next Saturday for episode 12 of Give Freedom a Chance. And I will obviously hope that you will be having a very nice Saturday, the rest of the day, a lovely weekend, and I'll see you again next Saturday.